Good evening, everyone. My name is Dan Vivian. I'm the Regional Climate Reality Leader for the Ottawa region, regional mentor, lead mentor for the Ottawa region. Tonight, we have Matthew Eglin and Raymond Leury, who are going to talk about their success in petitioning both the local Ottawa and federal government into providing EV, electric buses for the city of Ottawa. Now, they'll tell the details in tonight's presentation about how they were successful. It's a great opportunity for the rest of us climate reality leaders in understanding how we can petition governments to move forward with the reduction of greenhouse gases and the protection of the environment. Myself, I'm a climate reality leader from Mexico City in 2018. I'm a mechanical engineer with over 35 years of experience in energy conservation, facility capital assessments, energy audits, plant and project engineering, maintenance supervision, and I occasionally teach at community colleges. I also now concentrate on assisting building owners to retrofit their buildings to net zero. That's where the building produces as much renewable energy as it consumes in a year. That energy does not produce greenhouse gas pollution, and it leads to a more sustainable future. Raymond has a concern for environmental issues that's convinced him to purchase an electric vehicle over 8 years ago. He joined the EV Owners Group and recently became the president of the Electric Vehicle Council of Ottawa. Since retirement from IT strategy consulting career, he has spent much of his time researching and advocating for EVs of all sizes, from light duty to medium duty and heavy duty vehicles. Most recently, he has been the public face of the team that managed the successful campaign to get OC Transpo, that's our Ottawa Carleton Transpo, to transition to e-buses, electric buses. He has attended Al Gore's Climate Reality Project Leadership Core and holds an MBA from the University of Ottawa. Matthew Eglin is a climate reality leader from Los Angeles in 2018. Matthew became involved in climate reality leading the following a year after spending it on off the grid and on a sailboat. And of course, on a sailboat, you have to make all your own power and water. This experience has highlighted just how little we need, how little energy we need to use, and how much we actually waste. On his return, 2017, he switched to an electric vehicle, started to work with the EV community to promote the transition from gas to diesel, and he's a co-founder of the eBus Ottawa team. He now works as a consultant in transit, transportation, and emissions modeling, and he lives in Prince Edward County, former resident of Ottawa. So the way that we would like to do the presentation is we'd like to have the speakers do their presentation, and if any questions come up during the presentation, we ask that you put those questions in chat, and I will follow up with the questions following the presentations. And now Raymond will go ahead and speak. You're on mute, Raymond.
Of course, I had to start that way. Thanks very much, Dan, for the introduction. So I'm just going to share my screen here. So this journey for us has been a fairly long journey, and we will be talking about that today. And we just actually got success really in June with the announcement that OC Transpo made that they will be buying 450 electric buses. But let's go to the agenda. So we're going to start by reviewing what the ask was that we had of the Transit Commission, really, and Ottawa City Council in regards to electrifying the transit fleet. So we had specific, and we'll talk about lessons learned later, but this is one of the things that I think is quite important is you need to have a specific ask, and you need to have something that's quite concrete to try to drive things to a successful conclusion. Then Matt will go through the why, when, who, and how. The where obviously is Ottawa, right? So, but we'll go through that and explain some of the things that that we went through to do the to run this program. Then we'll go. I'll start back with a history of how things turned out to give you an idea of how how much work it is for one thing, but also how things tend to lead to another. So, anyways, I hope you'll see that as being helpful. Our goal is to try to explain to you how you could potentially do something similar, and you'll see that we've done something that will help anybody across Canada to do this much easier than what we had. And we'll end with a brief overview of the proposal, what it contains, and then lessons learned. Okay. So if we look at what we were actually seeking, okay, and this is from our launch of the campaign in March 10th, 2019. So that's 2.5 years ago is when we launched the campaign. We had been working on it for months prior to that. But essentially, this is a text of what we had as the launch of our campaign. So we're seeking the following from City Council, and we're making the point that many cities across Canada had already committed to e-buses in some shape or form at the time that we started working on this. So, so we propose that they run an electric bus pilot in 2020. And then that they introduce electric buses on regular service by 2021. So this year, we wanted them to purchase only electric buses starting in 2024. And also we wanted to have 100% electric bus fleet by 2035. Why 2035? The reason is that OC Transpo has a 15-year life cycle for their buses. So what we wanted to do was to match up with that life cycle so that they wouldn't have to retire buses early. So what they would do is instead of buying diesel replacement buses, they would buy electric buses as they needed to replace and expand or adjust the size of the fleet. Okay, so if you look at the what we ended up getting, so for the first point here, the pilot is being run this year. So they just got the first bus. They just received their first bus a few weeks ago, and we're going to have 4 buses in the fleet this fall. And the pilot really is it's not a pilot to determine whether the technology works. We know the technology works, and we'll talk about that a bit later. The pilot is more to get OC Transpo familiar with the technology, familiar with the changes in processes required for electric buses so that they could get used to the technology, right? The next thing, the introduction of electric buses is going to happen actually in 2021. So those 4 buses will be introduced in service later this fall. We're thinking around the October timeframe. So we've met that goal. So we're a bit late for the pilot, but we met the goal of regular service. We actually overachieved on the goal of purchasing only electric buses starting in 2024. So the last diesel buses that OC Transpo is likely to ever purchase were received late last year as part of a deal that had been struck a number of years ago. So we're actually ahead of that, which is kind of nice. We're 1 year behind in terms of electrifying the full fleet. So because we're starting in 2021, it's going to take an extra year to get to a full electric fleet. So we think we've done fairly well compared to our objectives. We're quite happy about that. We also think that the 2036 date there will probably end up being quite different. We're expecting that they're going to do some stuff to accelerate the electrification when they get to small numbers of diesels. Okay. So this is what we sought, and this is the result we got at this point. So let's dig into some of the details. So I'll pass it on to Matt to talk about the why.
So why electric buses? Well, when we started to look at what was going on in Ottawa a few years ago, we did some work to look at where the emissions in Ottawa were, and by far the biggest single emitter under the city's control was the diesel transportation fleet, of which most of it is transit. So there are also some garbage trucks and things like that, but in small numbers. It's almost half their emissions are coming from one source, the buses. It's 125,000 tons of CO2e, and it's a huge number in transportation. We also worked out that the savings of operating electric buses are similar to that of operating an electric car. It costs you about half as much to run. It's about 50,000 per year. So it's something where we can actually save money and do what's right for the planet at the same time. So it was a bit of a no-brainer for us to pick this. So we thought, incorrectly, that nobody had any grounds to object. We'll talk about this later. The other sort of side benefits of electric buses are lower noise and lower particulate pollution. Ottawa isn't a particularly bad city for pollution since we got rid of the power plants, but the pollution we do have is concentrated along the transit ways, and this will remove all of that from Ottawa. Noise is a huge issue for the buses. The hybrids that we have today are incredibly, we've actually just retired them, but the hybrids are incredibly noisy and they couldn't be used on quiet suburban streets. So electric buses have the option of going onto much quieter streets than the buses operate on today. Why did we choose battery electric buses? Well, it was the best of the available alternatives. The baseline is pretty horrendous. The diesel buses that we have today, the fleet average is 4.8 liters per 100 kilometers per passenger kilometer. So if you own a Prius, you're better off and you're only interested in the abstract concept of fuel consumption, you're using less fuel to drive than you would do if you were riding on a bus. We looked at compressed natural gas. There's no GHG savings, and in fact, if we're looking at the research that was done in Los Angeles, it looks like there might be a higher compressed natural gas buses may actually have higher emissions than diesel, but less pollution, less particulate pollution. Hydrogen was brought up, and this may be brought up again, but it's very expensive for both the bus and the fuel. And most, as in 99% of hydrogen, is currently made from methane or coal and has very, very high CO2 emissions, similar to CNG. Trolley buses weren't really considered. These are the overhead wire buses that are currently running in places like Vancouver. We don't currently have the infrastructure in place to do that, and the buses themselves are very expensive because they're essentially hand-built one-offs, and we'd have to build out the infrastructure. So trolley buses were not considered. So we started this in the fall of 2018, and the driver was some early announcements that we were seeing from both bus manufacturers and other cities in Canada, Edmonton and Toronto, that the technology became mainstream. The first testing of electric buses in Ottawa took place in 2010 by STO using BYD buses. This is quite an old technology. At the time, OC Transpo was focused on LRT, and the staff were talking about hydrogen, CNG, or rather than e-buses. And we had, at the time, we had concerns that the managements may want to make the e-buses fail, and I think that was a bit unkind. But the experience with the hybrid buses certainly holds out that that wasn't a fully successful project, and they should have known that it wouldn't have been successful. And in those early days, we started to build some relationships with our local councillors, Councillor McKenney and Menard, who are the two downtown councillors. And this led to a motion in early 2019 to ask the staff to look at electric buses. So who do we talk to make this happen? We initially set out to influence council, and we had some really good partnerships with Ecology Ottawa and the Healthy Transportation Coalition. And we actually did door-to-door work in the chair of the Transit Commission's ward in the city. We talked to every councillor that would meet with us, I think, which is all but two, I think. And we worked out who our supporters were within council. We had strong supporters, and we had sort of, yeah, this is a good idea, but this is the city, so can we really do this? Supporters. And we worked with those people who were most supportive to work forward. What we didn't expect was a considerable amount of staff resistance from the senior management of OC Transpo, and that became a somewhat of a difficult point, particularly for Raymond, as he was berated by some of the leadership of OC Transpo in public a couple of times, and I was taken aside and given a talking to, as well as I actually worked as a consultant for the city. But in the process of building this campaign, we did a lot of feet on the ground work. We were at events. We were at every EV event with people there to talk about buses. We were working with other organizations within the community. And as a result of that, we got to talk to Catherine McKenna, our local MP, and at the time, the Minister of the Environment. She was talking to Raymond and myself and Kathleen about how do I get a really good electric car for my family? And we responded with, can you stop buying diesel buses, please? And that kind of two-sided odd conversation continued over several events when we bumped into her, and in fact meeting with her advisors on the subject. I don't know if Catherine ever got her EV. I think she did. She was driving a Volt, a ministerial Volt at the time. I think she was looking for a personal car, and I don't know what she ended up getting. But we certainly got through to her, and that ended up being a very powerful tool for us. It was a little bit unexpected, but in the run-up to the election campaign, I got a call from one of her assistants asking me if I felt that electric buses for Canadian municipalities was a sensible idea. The person who was asking me knew that I knew what the answer to that question I was going to say was. And then she asked me the key question, what about timescales? And I said, now. There was a conversation about this, and she said, okay, leave this with me. About 2 weeks later, the Liberals published their environmental platform for the election in 2018. And 2019, sorry. And lo and behold, the timescales I gave to the assistant made it into the campaign promise. Great. But campaign promises are not worth anything, as we all know. But to our surprise, the ministerial letter to Minister McKenna, who was then the innovation minister and responsible for funding of transit, directly talked about zero emissions buses, saying that they would put on the road 5,000 buses. Again, with the timescales that the eBus Ottawa team had worked out, and I communicated through to her assistant. So this became a direct order from the Prime Minister to the Minister, which is incredible. And this really talks to the point is that if you've got a politician in front of you, talk to them. You'll be very surprised what can happen. Next slide. What was Raymond for you? So how did we get there? What was the methodology we used? Well, the first thing we did is we gained expertise. We did a huge amount of research. and we published it at plugincanada.ca, and we crowdsourced questions for a Q&A. So there was an FAQ on that site, so you can take a look at it. And a lot of those questions were raised by the public. And so we managed to, we obviously came up with all the sort of objections that we could think of, but we actually got real objections from real people that are outside our bubble. And we answered those and put them up on the website. And it's a very good resource. If you're ever interested in looking at how e-buses pan out, it's a fantastic resource. We went through the stages of looking at what were the emissions, what were the costs, how could this be put together, and we developed a case and a plan for how to do this. We worked with our partners, so this was the students at Ottawa U and particularly at Carleton, where we had two organizers, excellent organizers there with Justin and Austin, slightly confusing. And we work with Ecology Ottawa and the Healthy Transportation Commission and the broader transit team groups around Ottawa. Those partners enable us to put feet on the ground, enable us to do a letter writing campaign, put together a petition, all fantastic cooperative operation between the organizations. As we said before, talk to the politician in front of you. We talked to everybody we came across. Raymond and I got shouted at by the mayor. And that turned out to be a really good thing because he knows exactly who we are. He remembers us and he remembered the campaign. And he also put a campaign promise about getting e-buses going, which he also followed through on. Influence the influencer. If an MP's or minister's assistant calls you, talk to them, make sure they're convinced. Make sure that they're the right person you should be talking to. They will tell you if they're not the right person. They will probably give you the person you should be talking to. And the last thing is just communicate, communicate, communicate. We talk to politicians, we talk to the public, we talk to other environmental groups, we talk to the other political parties that weren't in power, we talked to the Green Party. We even talked to the Conservatives. It didn't go well, but we did actually talk to them. But we did get a whole bunch of very nice bags, which we threw out. But anyway, next slide, I guess. So Raymond, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the history a bit. Now, there's a couple of reasons why I want to go through the history. We want to give you a sense for how much time this takes and how much effort it takes. We are skipping a lot of things that happen as part of the process, but there's a few things that happen that are sort of serendipitous or whatever the word is. I can't pronounce that in English, but luck essentially that we. One of my principles in life is that when you're presented with an opportunity, which is a lucky thing for you, what makes it lucky is that you take advantage of it and make something with it, right? So we were presented with a few opportunities that we just grabbed onto and use those to help our project, right? So like Matt alluded to just now, during the municipal elections in October 2018, Mayor Watson promised an e-bus pilot during the term of council. That's the scope of the promise he made. Of course, we wanted more than e-bus pilot. We wanted actually to start implementing e-buses in massive amounts, right? So we met with Mr. McKenna's staff. So this gets a bit confusing here because there's Minister McKenna and there's Councillor McKenney, which happen to represent the same area of Ottawa. So this was so hopefully I won't confuse the two and you won't be too confused by this. But anyways, when we spoke to Mr. McKenna herself in person at some events and also spoke to her staff, the message we got is we can't give them money if they don't ask. So Mr. McKenna was very interested in making the capital, the greenest capital in the world and all that, right? So she was interested in projects that would be green and be centered in Ottawa, which is where she, the riding she was representing. So, but of course, Ottawa had to take the lead, right? So how do you make that happen then? So we talked to, as Matt alluded to earlier, Councillor McKenney and also Councillor Menard, and we strategized with Councillor McKenney in early 2019, and we tried to figure out, well, how do we start the process to get OC Transpo running with this project? How do we actually prime the pump for it to happen? And what we came up with is a question to staff that would be asked at the Transit Commission. And there's the question right there. Essentially, what is it going to take to do a pilot, right? And we got considerable pushback from Mr. Manconi, who is the head of transit at Ottawa, because for some reason he was very enthused about the possibility of using either compressed natural gas or hydrogen. And if you want to talk more about why those are bad options, I know that Matt did cover it. We'll be happy to answer questions, because I know there's a lot of people who think that hydrogen has a future in this space, but we will convince you, I think, that it does not. So anyways, bottom line is we had done our research, we were ready, and this is the question that OC Transpo was essentially mandated to answer based on the ask from the Transit Commissioner. So as this is happening, we're striking a partnership, which Matt also talked about a bit before. So Ecology Ottawa is a premier environmental organization, if you will, in Ottawa. They're the figurehead for most of the ecological activity that happens, or environmental movement in Ottawa. The Healthy Transportation Coalition is very much involved in promoting mass transit and promoting better roads and less roads and biking and walking and all that. So their mandate fits really well with what we were trying to do. So what we did is, with this partnership and our friends at these are our student representatives here with the mayor, actually, at the launch of the campaign at at Carleton U. So what we did with Ecology Ottawa is we used their platform that actually automatically sends letters to your councillor based on your postal code, and sends a letter to the mayor, sends a letter to a bunch of other people based on what the parameters are set in the software in question, right? So what this meant is that when Matt said earlier that we did some campaigning in the Transit Commission chair's ward, it meant that the Transit Commission chair got a whole bunch of emails from people, ordinary people, asking for him to support electric buses, right? So anyways, on to the future. We talked to Mayor Watson. This is where we were, quote unquote, shouted at from the mayor. He told us to talk to the transit chair, Hubley. That's the guy that we, in whose word we did some door-to-door work. So we started talking to Hubley and other members of the Transit Commission, and of course talked to Mr. McKenna, right? So in May of 2019, there was a response to Councillor McKinney's initial query, and essentially the response here, TTC 003, said, well, e-buses, they're not going to work in Ottawa. They're not good enough and all this. So essentially, no, we're not doing a pilot. Well, the mayor had promised during his campaign that there would be a pilot. So the mayor wasn't too happy about this. So what he did is, a few weeks later, June 12th, 2019, Council actually passed a motion directing the Transit Commission to do something. This is asked backwards, really. Normally, the Transit Commission would work on something, and they would come up with a proposal, and then Council would vote on the proposal. So normally it goes the other way, but in this case, Council was actually motioning or set out a motion for OC Transpo to figure out how to do a pilot. And it gave him a full week to do this, okay? So, we're guessing the mayor wasn't too happy. So what happened is, once the next Transit Commission meeting occurred, miraculously, OC Transpo found about $6 million to sole source 2 short-range buses. So we didn't talk about this earlier when we talked about the advantages of e-bus and all that, but we did not want short-range buses. And Nova only builds, or at the time only built short-range buses. I won't go into many details about that, but we thought that short-range buses would actually result in a pilot that would fail, like the short-range buses pilot that happened in Montreal. It was considered a failure, or a not a great success because of the short-range nature of them and having to charge them regularly and all that. Okay, so essentially, just to move along a bit further, at this meeting, when OC Transpo proposed to sole source 2 buses, we were working behind the scenes with some of the councillors, and essentially the councillors said, well, we should be tendering this. We shouldn't be doing sole source, and this was key for us because what happened then is they had to issue an RFP, and that gave us an opportunity to have some influence in the RFP and get rid of this issue of short-range buses. Okay. So anyways, move on further. We had an e-bus actually at one of the events that we participate in every year at Lansdowne Park, and they provided some rides in the electric bus, and got good press coverage and all that. And then in the fall of 2019, this is when the election happened, and that's where there was a commitment to stop funding. So in the election and after the election, when the ministerial letter came out, there was a commitment to stop funding non-zero emission buses. So this isn't electric specifically. So this includes would include hydrogen buses if someone was proposing them, but essentially non-zero emission buses would not be funded after 2023. So this is key for other municipalities in Canada. So if you're faced with a situation where your local transit authority is not planning on transitioning to electric buses, one of the big sticks for them is that they won't be able to get any money from the federal government after 2023 for diesel buses. Okay, so and as Matthew will tell you, most transit organizations, if not all, get the funding from the federal government to buy their buses. So so this is a real problem if they want to buy diesel buses. Okay, they also announced, this is something that Matthew was very adamant with the minister also, that they should stop funding compressed natural gas fueling stations because it doesn't do anything about greenhouse gases. So anyways, federal election and all that. Then small detail here, but the OC Transpo tried to do something else, to use an existing vehicle to source the buses, but again, this was contrary to what staff had told them to do. So they were asked to do an RFP. So, and actually, there was a council motion also. So separate from the need to do a pilot, there was a separate motion from council to look at converting the entire fleet, okay, to non-diesel. So the way we had worked this out with Councillor Minal in particular is that we wanted them to convert the entire fleet to electric. Okay, so the reason it says non-diesel there is because of intervention of staff that wanted to look at other options, which includes compressed natural gas and hydrogen, right? So anyways, RFP came out, long-range buses, okay, a minimum of 250 kilometers, which is exactly what we wanted. And of course, COVID sort of threw a few wrenches into the story, okay? So, but at the end of 2020, on December 5th, we got an announcement that they would buy 4, okay, so up from 2 long-range buses from New Flyer. And these are the buses we're starting to get now. So we got the first one a few weeks ago, and we should have the 4 of those on the road sometime later this fall, okay? Also, coincidentally, or maybe not, Mr. Manconi announced his retirement in May, and then in June, OC Transpo came out with a report in response to that other motion from Councillor Sudds and Councillor Minal, recommending that they transition the full fleet to e-buses, and this was approved unanimously by the Transit Commission, and the week after it was approved unanimously by City Council. Okay. So what does the report recommend? Well, there are 4 buses on the way, right? Like I said earlier, but the proposal actually in the report, which was adopted, was proposing to purchase 74 e-buses for delivery in 2022-2023. So this represents a next batch of buses that OC Transpo would be replacing regardless. Okay, the original plan was they would replace with diesel, but now they're replacing them with electric. And also there'll be up to 450 e-buses purchased by 2027. So this represents also buses that would normally be replaced. There will be some differences because year over year, there's various reasons why more or less buses are required. So the number is approximate, but we're expecting to have about half the fleet electric by 2027. So we see this as quite a very positive development. So Matt, I'll pass it on to you for the lessons.
I'm going to start the lessons by saying nobody was more surprised than the team when we won. So this is a situation where we were lucky, but we manufactured that luck. So this is a very important lesson for us. As I sat in Los Angeles 3 years ago, the thing that I remember most, one of the things, there's lots of things actually, one of the things I remember most was a discussion about public utility commissions in the US. These are the organizations that control the power grid in each state. And one of the points that was made, and this was made at length by Al Gore, in fact, was that those commissions have a limited number of people on them. And to get a majority, in some places, you only need to convince 5 people. And in other places, it might be 15 people, but the average, I think, is 9 for a majority on a PUC in a state in the US to get rid of their coal-fired power stations. And my thought when I was listening to that was, well, that's great, but how do you find those 9 people? Well, if I look at what we did here, and that first point there, change the rules, get federal government to stop funding diesel, we actually only needed to convince one person, and that was Minister McKenna. And she was actively looking for, I think in infrastructure terms, you call it shovel ready, but let's say it's signature ready in this case, a single thing that she could do within her scope of control to make a huge difference. And it turned out that getting the federal government to stop funding diesel was actually easier than convincing council to do the right thing. We spent probably 5% of our time working with McKenna's office to 95% of our time trying to influence council. And that 5% was the one that paid off, by far and away the easiest part of doing it. And that gave us a huge stick. Basically, the mayor's intent to get e-buses rolling were backed up by the fact that he couldn't get funding for any other path. So that was a huge difference. And it's this idea of using the smallest number of people for the maximum impact. If we knew that if we could get the mayor on side and Mr. McKenna on side, we could get council on side. We were very, very afraid that staff would seek to overrule us. I talked to some of the senior people in OC Transpo, and they were saying, oh, 2026, 2027, we'll start to look at it. But it turns out money speaks. So those federal contacts and the indirect pressure we could put onto council and therefore onto staff really paid off. It's an incredible series of events. I don't think if we hadn't done the work with council, we wouldn't have succeeded either, because we wouldn't have prepared them for the change. The work we did absolutely meant that every councillor knew about e-buses and knew why they were important. Even if they disagreed with us, they knew why it was important. And the staff had done the work because we prompted them to. So they were ready. When the federal government changed the rules, they didn't push back. They just said, okay, we're going with this. But they wouldn't have been able to do that had we not pushed them to do their own research. If you're going to recreate this kind of success, you need luck. I'll fully admit that. But the manufacturing of that luck is fairly straightforward. Do your research, learn about the subject, learn about what you're trying to change, learn about why it's a change, and keep within those bounds. If somebody asks you a question and it's outside your scope of knowledge, go research it and publish what you find. And we did that repeatedly, and it really worked. Don't discount the bigger goal. We set out to change the situation in one municipality. We changed it for all municipalities. People work for years to close coal plants, but it took the signature of one person to lead to the plan to close all coal plants in Canada. It's sometimes the big goal is the easier one to do because it involves fewer people. Keep on message. Say what you need to say and keep saying it, and keep your friends on message, and make sure all your friends row in the same direction. We had some flubs in our project where people that supported us didn't fully understand the subject matter and asked the wrong questions. And we needed to, when we caused some problems, but we got over it, it was fine. But it's better if people are properly briefed. Engage multiple stakeholders and find the objectors and work with them. Work with the objectors, don't ignore them. And perhaps one of the most important things we found was patience. It was frustrating at the time when we were going to every single transit meeting and every single council meeting. But it's, you know, and the last thing is use the training you've got. You've gone through training. It's good training. They tell you the right things and how to approach things. Be confident in what you know, and be confident that you have the climate science down pat as it applies to the subject you're trying to change. It works. The training works.
Great. So that's the presentation. And actually, we didn't really talk too much about the Electric Vehicle Council of Ottawa, but just a note on that. So where we started this project was part of the Electric Vehicle Council of Ottawa, and we are a nonprofit, totally volunteer-based, totally independent organization that what we do is promote EVs, right? So, and for us, it was a natural thing to tackle the e-bus issue because we already had lots of expertise in the space, right? One of the things I want to mention before we go to questions is that there's a lot of lobbying happening for all sorts of things around us, and this applies particularly to hydrogen and compressed natural gas a bit less now, but hydrogen definitely. There's an organization called QTRIC. It's a Canadian Urban Transit something. I can't remember the last three letters what they mean, but essentially it's a group of industry players and municipalities that are doing a bunch of different things to advance cleaner transportation, okay? Now, the thing is, it's got industry players, right? So if you look at the members of QTRIC, you'll see that there are bus manufacturers in there. That's fine, right? But there are a bunch of people who have interests in hydrogen in particular. So QTRIC is representing the interest of industry as much as anything else, right? So one of my favorite sayings is from Warren Buffett, and he says, "Don't ask a barber if you need a haircut." Right? So if you ask QTRIC if you need an electric bus, they'll say yes. If you ask QTRIC, do I need a hydrogen bus? They'll say yes, because they have interest in those two areas in particular. So why are hydrogen buses so bad? We mentioned it to some degree. It's not that they're fundamentally bad, but the problem is the hydrogen is at this time is made mostly from fossil fuels, which results in greenhouse gas emissions, considerable greenhouse gas emissions. And but there is something called green hydrogen, which is hydrogen produced from electrolysis. Now, if you produce green hydrogen from clean energy, clean electricity, that gives you, carbon, zero carbon footprint hydrogen, right? The problem is at this point, the cost of green hydrogen is about 4 times the cost of the run-of-the-mill brown, I think they call it hydrogen. They have all sorts of colors to classify the different sources of hydrogen. But the point is, it's prohibitively expensive at this point to do hydrogen because of the cost of the fuel and the cost of the buses. Okay, so so we do not believe that hydrogen will be economically feasible for mass market transportation requirements, including heavy transport, actually. So there may be a case for hydrogen for very specific niche applications or areas where it's difficult to use anything else. You could think of rockets. You could think of where battery electric wouldn't work too well with a rocket. Same with airlines, long distance airlines, and long distance shipping. We're probably going to see hydrogen and or ammonia play a role in that space. But we believe all other transportation requirements will be met with battery electric. So Dan, do you want to go to the questions?
Yeah. We don't have very many questions. Imogen, all that I'm seeing here is one, and then I have one for myself personally. Imogen, you can let me know if I'm not seeing the right chat. But so it's a question from Jason. He said, or a comment at the very least, stopping funding of diesel buses is a great example of why tackling supply rather than demand works better in fighting climate change. Do you guys have any comments about that?
So my comment on that is it's sort of a bit of the reverse, right? So this is going to reduce the demand for diesel, right? Right. So to me, we could. This is my opinion, and I'll, you're all free to disagree. It's nice to shut down pipelines and all that, but the fundamental problem is we need to get rid of the need for pipelines. So if we go to electric buses and we go to electric vehicles, we reduce the need for oil, and those pipelines aren't required anymore, right? Because the real goal is not to block expanding the pipelines that we have today. The goal is to shut down the ones that are there, right? And stop burning stuff, right?
So I think just to give a scale for this, OC Transpo's use of diesel fuel is 44 million liters per year. 44 million liters.
Yeah. So if you want a scale of what that may look like in a more practical or more relatable sense, it's about the equivalent of, those fuel trucks that you see, the double tankers there. It's about 2 of those double tankers per day during a weekday, and about 1 per day on the weekend. Okay, that's a lot of fuel. That's a lot of pollution, a lot of greenhouse gases, right?
So I just want to make a comment along that lines, and it'll probably lead into my question too, because I'm going to put you guys on the spot. We didn't talk about this beforehand, but so the big heavy hitters in reducing greenhouse gases are transportation and buildings. Approximately 40% of the energy in the first world goes towards transportation. Most of that's coming from fossil fuels, and about 40% goes into buildings, and also coming primarily from fossil fuels. So just to also support what Raymond said, it's better to get rid of the usage of those by all of us. So on the demand side, as opposed to throttling off the supply side. What are we going to do if we throttle off supply side of natural gas? Are we going to live in the cold? No, we're not going to do that. We need to switch over to you know, in those provinces that have low carbon grids, we need to switch over to electricity. So the heavy hitters there right now, and everybody's moving towards lower carbon grids, but Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, BC, all have low carbon grids. So on the building side, it makes sense to move to electric heat pumps in those grids. The remaining grids are moving towards low carbon. It makes sense in every province to move towards electric vehicles. There's lower greenhouse gas emissions on electric vehicles, no matter what the source is in the generation. So now, the way that I'm going to put you guys on the spot is about 2018, I suggested to Raymond that we should be working on the heavy hitters. We should be working on buildings, and we should be working on transportation. You two guys have done fantastic on the transportation side and still go along on the transportation side. Buildings have done all right too, but on my side of things, I didn't hit as heavy as what you guys have. So the buildings in Ottawa have done well by the federal government in the first place. We now have the Greener Homes grants that help everybody with the energy audits and grants for their homes to move off of fossil fuels primarily. And in the city, people like Janice Ashworth and Andrea Flowers and Mike Fletcher and others have been doing very well in creating the Better Homes loans program, which we expect to come out in the fall. But so, guys, here's the ask that I have of you. You know, your strategization has been fantastic. Many municipalities are starting to move towards no new natural gas infrastructures. I think that's a reasonable goal, is to move Ottawa towards no new natural gas infrastructures. Now, mind you, the heavy hitting is going to be in the existing buildings, but if we can move towards no new natural gas infrastructures, that's going to train the builders, and eventually that moves out to the HVAC suppliers, who are going to be forced to learn about heat pumps and install heat pumps and really generate an infrastructure to install heat pumps. So that's the ask. The ask is, can you guys help strategize with that? I know you're really busy on the EV side, but can you be mentors and leaders towards that side? And let's get something going along that lines.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the one thing that we were successful with, and in fact our next campaign is probably going to be the same sort of idea, is that we are looking for ideas where we have to get things done by influencing a smaller number of people, Raymond and I are just starting to work on getting CCS as a standard in Canada. We don't quite know how we're going to get there yet, but it's a detail in the EV world, but it's down to one person to make that decision. The issue with buildings is that we could move 1,000 diesel buses off the road by getting John Manconi to say so. We can get 5,000 diesel buses off the road by getting Catherine McKenna to say yes. Very, very simple, single sentence asks of those people that had huge impacts. To do the same with buildings is very difficult. But one of the things we do need to do is stop the rot. And that means changing the building code, introducing much higher installation standards, mandating 200 amps, banning new installations of fossil fuel heating, and making sure that happens right now. Because I can tell you, there are houses being built in Ottawa today with 100 amp panels and gas furnaces and gas water heaters.
Exactly.
And that's completely unsustainable.
Yeah. So to give you a bit of a shorter answer is the answer is yes. We're absolutely going to help
Yes.
help you strategize for that, because our goal is we're doing it in EV space mostly right now, but our goal is to reduce greenhouse gases as much as possible as soon as possible. We have a climate emergency. We need to act now, right? So yes, we'd be more than happy to help strategize and figure out how to address that problem. Matt has outlined some of the things we need to do, but we should probably have a session offline where we could discuss that and determine how to do that. And then, yeah, it is the reason we're doing work in the EV side is because this is a selfish thing from my perspective anyways. To us, this is the lowest hanging fruit and the easiest thing to do, really, because EVs are actually, for those listening who aren't driving EVs, so this is a whole other conversation, but EVs are much better, and I say much better than gas or diesel vehicles. And if you want to have a discussion on that, we'd be happy to have a discussion. So it's not a sacrifice going to an EV. Actually, you'll save money over time, right? The more you drive, the more money you save, and you're doing something right for the planet. So it's really a low-hanging fruit that we're trying to drive as fast as possible, right? And we're seeing we're seeing the whole world move aggressively in that direction. I've seen numbers of market share of passenger vehicles in Europe. Excuse me. I think the first quarter of this year was something like 18% in Europe of vehicles were a plug-in of some type. Most of them are actual full battery electric, but some are plug-in hybrids. So we're seeing a massive increase in the market share there, and a massive increase in the adoption of EVs. We're also seeing manufacturers commit to investing tens of billions of dollars. So I think the one that's investing the less is Stellantis, which just announced their plans a couple of weeks ago, and they're investing $35 billion between now and 2025 to electrify their fleet. The other companies have announced larger amounts. So we're seeing the industry going in that direction, and it's going to make a big difference in terms of greenhouse gases that we emit going forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I definitely agree, Dan. We'll certainly join you if you want to go down that path. And the only thing that concerns me is that it as Raymond said, we're lazy. We just pick the low-hanging fruit to do this. It's a bit harder to do what you're suggesting.
So just to support that, houses and buildings have similar paybacks to moving to EVs.
Yeah.
So to move a house to net zero, it is cheaper lifetime costs, initially higher costs, but cheaper lifetime costs to move your house to renewable energy. And it's the same order of magnitude. A car emits about five tons of greenhouse gases a year, and a house using natural gas in Ottawa emits just over 5 tons of greenhouse gases a year.
Yep.
So
so I absolutely see the potential. There's no doubt that that's the next thing to tackle for Ottawa in particular, right? So if we're looking at what is the impact that the typical city dweller in Ottawa, or the rest of Canada for that matter, could do, the profile is very similar to what we have here. Like you said, about 40% of emissions is transportation, and about 40% is buildings, right? So those are the elephants in the room that we should be worrying about first. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing things like recycling and all that. But the one of my pet peeves, if I could put it that way, is that there's a lot of people who see themselves as contributing to being more environmentally conscious because they're recycling. Yeah, they are contributing. It's good. Recycling is good, but it's not the biggest thing you could do, right? So there are bigger fish to fry, and it's time that we attack those as fast as we can.
Yeah, no, I agree. We have to stop, but there's a lot of negative progress going on at the moment. Near where I live here in Prince Edward County, the provincial government has just subsidized Enbridge to put in a new gas supply for about 1,000 houses, just on a road not far from here. The cost of that subsidy on a per house basis was close to $30,000 per house passed, not per house served, per house passed. More than enough to give every one of those houses an air source heat pump.
Well, actually, you could do ground source probably for that price.
Very close, yeah. And this is in an area where people are generally heating with propane, so this is it's desperate. So we have a lot further to go on buildings. People talk to me all the time about, well, when all cars are electric, how's the grid going to cope? I'm going to say, and I always say, it'll do fine because it's going to have to be upgraded to deal with your heat pump. What's a heat pump? I get back. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, we have to.
So that is a very common question we get, by the way, about that. Same with the buses, right? What's going to happen? Well, reality is the buses, the way they're going to implement them in Ottawa in particular, is that they're going to be charging mostly overnight. And we have a surplus of electricity in Ontario overnight for a number of reasons. So the peaks are usually during the day, hot days, like not today. Today is a bit cold here in Ottawa. But hot summer days when air conditioning is working at its maximum, that's when the peaks occur. And by charging the buses at night, we're taking the advantage of, in some cases, electricity that we would have to sell off to other partners in other jurisdictions. In some cases, actually, we have to pay them to take the electricity that we can't consume. So there's an opportunity for us to get very low cost electricity to power a good proportion of the fleet. And all of this is being studied ad nauseum by the utilities. They've been looking at this issue for probably the last 10 years now, because they've any prudent utility is seeing the writing on the wall, and they've known that EVs are going to happen in a massive way at some point. The question has always been, when exactly is that going to start really ramping up? But they've known this is coming, and they've been looking at it from every perspective possible, and they're putting plans in place to adjust for it. So overall, we think the studies have shown that in Ontario we would need to electrify the full fleet. We would need to increase production by I think it's 19%, and that would be over a period of about somewhere between 20 and 30 years. So we're talking about increasing production by something on the order of 1% per year. So it's really not dramatic at all.
Excellent. We've gone through all the questions in chat, and I want to thank you guys for presenting, and I want to thank all of our participants for watching, and I think we'll wrap it up. So thanks, everybody, and let's keep on pushing.
Thanks a lot, Dan.
Have a good night.
You too.